y amor, tanto que te he buscado y el mundo le preguntó, de la tierra yo me iré porque yo guardo un secreto en el fondo de mi alma, te lo juro vida mía, que nadie se lo diré, verdad que sí, verdad que sí,
que nadie se lo diré,
verdad que sí, verdad que sí,
que nadie se lo diré.
esto lo hago mi amor, porque estoy desesperado, esto lo hago mi amor, porque estoy desesperado.
Welcome to the War on Immigrants Report. This is Adam Carroll. Since the last show, the war on immigrants has continued to expand to new fronts and new battles. There is, of course, the struggle on Capitol Hill. There is the struggle at the militarized southern border. It is an international struggle for rights against racism and exclusionary laws. There are anti-immigrant movements not only in Europe, but around the world. Even across our northern border in civilized Canada, the Parti Québécois is rallying its rural and suburban base against immigrant diversity. In an article called Quebec's Tea Party Moment, reporter Martin Patriquin writes how particular religious traditions are being banned among city workers and in the school system, even while a crucifix is still bolted to a wall of Quebec's National Assembly. The Parti Québécois leader, Jeannette Bertrand, has stated publicly that as a woman she would be afraid to be served by a Muslim doctor. Just as the Tea Party promotes absurd anti-Sharia legislation in half the states of the Union, in Canada the Town Council of Hérouville has voted to require new arrivals to abide by a code of conduct, stating that they would refrain from public stoning, stake burnings, and female circumcision. Oh, Canada, such negativity. Restrictions on rights are often linked to campaigns to marginalize a particular tribe or religion or demographic. Because of persecution and draconian laws, communities and whole ethnic groups are being made stateless, from Burma to the Dominican Republic, living in a state of limbo, living ghost lives among the living. Yes, racism and various forms of xenophobia are in play, but to unpack that fact, what are some of the overlooked social, psychological, and political factors that support and sustain this increasingly dangerous trend? Today's show will focus on the human rights crisis in the Dominican Republic. Following the recent Dominican High Court ruling that annulled the citizenship of anyone born in the country to non-citizens after 1929. The decision applies to at least 200,000 people, mostly people of Haitian descent, many of whom have lived all their lives in the Dominican Republic and think of themselves as Dominican. Who are Dominican? What happens to these people? In New York City, there are about 95,000 Haitian and 380,000 Dominican immigrants, according to a 2011 American Community Survey. How are they responding to this? And are they working together? What implications does this court ruling have on their own immigrant communities' struggle to gain rights in the U.S.? In today's show, we speak with two quite different Latino leaders. Socially conservative New York State Senator Rev. Rubén Díaz of the 32nd Senatorial District in the Bronx, and also with Claudia De la Cruz, organizer of protests in Washington Heights and part of the Urban Butterflies movement, as she spoke at a Socialist Action Forum. We will also speak with Todd Miller, reporter with Tom's Dispatch, who will bring an important aspect of the current developments into discussion. As he wrote in a recent article about U.S. involvement in Haitian-Dominican border tensions, considering that U.S. forces occupied the Dominican Republic and Haiti numerous times in the previous century, it is easy to imagine why Washington's border chieftains consider this sad, impoverished spot part of our backyard. Not far from where I'm standing is the Codevi industrial free trade zone that straddles the border. There, Haitian workers churn out jeans mainly for Levi-Strauss and the North American market, earning less than $3 a day. With this in mind, the experimental border control technologies being tested along the U.S.-Mexican boundary line and the border industrial complex that has grown up around it are heading abroad in a major way. If Congress finally passes a new multi-billion-dollar border policing package, its effects will be felt not only among and along U.S. borders, but also at the edges of its empire. Systems that marginalize others also make them disappear. Because Human Rights Day is December 10th, in the last segment of today's show, we will also speak with artist Miriam Khani about Index of the Disappeared, the project which she and Chitra Ganesh are working on, a physical archive of post-9/11 disappearances and a mobile platform for public dialogue. As artists in residence at NYU, they are planning a collaborative project with the Center for Constitutional Rights and also convening a working group on archiving as a radical practice. Now please stay tuned for the War on Immigrants Report.
Donde quiera que tú vayas, yo iré contigo a tu lado. Si alguien se opone, que tú me entregues tu mano con esta espada que tengo. Esta paso el corazón para defender mi hembra. A mí me sobra valor, verdad que sí, verdad que sí.
A mí me sobra valor.
Verdad que sí, verdad que sí.
A mí me sobra valor.
Dale, Lidio.
I'm very happy to be here and share the, I can't say it in English, pero el enovariamiento that I feel, because I don't have cojones to encojonarme. Just how pissed I am at what's happening in the Dominican Republic, how disgusted I am. I am a second-generation immigrant, born to Dominican parents from the Bronx, which happens to be the poorest congressional district in the United States. So I was born to working-class parents. And so I make meaning of what's happening in the Dominican Republic definitely from an immigrant perspective, from a class perspective, and from a race perspective. And I think that we could be disgusted at what's happening in DR, but we shouldn't be shocked. And we shouldn't be shocked because, unfortunately, we have a history of invasions, of capitalism, of militarism that comes along with internalizing oppression and therefore oppressing others. That's our history. Of course, there's also a history of resistance that we need to reclaim, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the responsibilities that we have. But in order for me to make sense of what's happening, I need to think back to my grandmother. My grandmother was a black Dominican who worked the sugarcane plantations, because that's what they were, during the 1930s and 40s, along with Haitians. And this black woman, who happened to go to a 4th grade in the Dominican Republic, and I was sharing this with Carlito, reserved a certain level of animosity towards Haitians because of what she was taught in school. Because it was institutionalized by Trujillo then, and it's something that continues to go through generations, the idea that Haitians invaded us, that they raped us, that they did all sorts of, crazy things to us. And my grandmother knew that to be a fact because she was taught that in school, regardless of her personal relationships with Haitians in the sugar cane fields, which was very different from what she was being taught in school. So I grew up in a very schizophrenic space where humanly there was a connection to Haitian brothers and sisters where we lived, because I lived in the Dominican Republic for about 10 years, when we understood that we were the same, right? But when my grandmother spoke about it, based on what she had been taught, we weren't the same. Okay, so it was kind of crazy, bipolar space to be in. Understanding the way that, racism has been institutionalized, the way that we've been taught that is normal, that to be black is to be Haitian, because Dominicans are trigueños. wanting to be like the white oppressor, the colonizer. And so much is so that I was sharing with Carlitos when we were coming up the elevator that it was shocking to me to know that there had been so many freedom fighters who were of Haitian descent in the Dominican Republic, whose last names were changed in history so that we wouldn't be able to acknowledge that we had Haitian freedom fighters in the struggles against the colonizers, such as the case of Luperon, Gregorio Luperon, whose last name was Duperon, not Luperon. Okay, and so in order for me to kind of figure out the space of schizophrenia in which my grandmother was and I was being taught, I had to go back to that history and understand that a lot of the systems and a lot of that strength to fight colonization came from the Black Pearl, which is Haiti.
That was activist Claudia De la Cruz, part of the Dominican women's group Urban Butterflies, speaking this week at the Socialist Action Forum. Now we have an interview with State Senator Rev. Rubén Díaz of the Bronx. Reverend Rubén Díaz, thank you for seeing us at your office today. And you're the state senator for the district in the Bronx. Which district is it?
The 32nd Senatorial District.
Yes, and could you say something about your district, the constituents?
Well, now I have a new district, with the new redistribution. Mm-hmm. Now I have a new district. Now I'm going all the way to Concord Village, to Webster Avenue, Sunview, Parkchester. It's a crazy thing.
Yeah, and is it a diverse community here?
Oh yes, yes. Mostly black and Hispanic, but we got all kind.
Yeah, and probably a lot of Dominican Americans, right?
Yes, a Mexican.
Mexican also.
Honduran.
Uh-huh.
I think more Dominican and Honduran.
Yeah. And how about yourself? What's your background?
Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican.
I'm U.S. citizen.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see that you've joined in to call for the rights of Haitians in the Dominican Republic. And I read your op-ed this past week in the newspaper. I thought it was very strong, and I wondered maybe you could say something about how you came to write it.
I have been in Haiti. I have been in Santo Domingo. I travel more to Santo Domingo than to any other part of the world. I consider myself to be the community that I'm Dominican. So I love Dominican country. I love the country. I love the people. They've been good to me. But it hurts to see a law that says to some people, we will take away your citizenship all the way back to 1929. They are not saying from now on, which I could understand that. I would never approve it, but I could understand it. They say from now on, from here on, anyone that is born in the Dominican Republic with parents from other countries will not be allowed to become citizens. I will allow that. But they're not saying that. They're saying, they are saying back to 1929, 84 years ago.
Right.
I got a lot of, in the Senate, I employ a lot of Dominicans. Mm-hmm. Some of them, their parents are not fully Dominican. So that means that there are going to be a lot of Dominicans that are not Dominican because their parents were not Dominican citizens, or their grandparents. Mm-hmm. That is a ridiculous, abusive, discriminatory, stupid, you could call, piece of legislation.
Here in the United States, Dominicans join other ethnicities asking for immigration reform. They come here to get a better life for many reasons. But then back home, the Haitians who come for the same reasons are being completely excluded.
Yeah, we are. The most vociferous
On immigration reform.
are Dominican.
Yeah. But I think that the United States has the rule that if you're born here, you're a citizen. But unfortunately, around the world, this is not so common. I read, and I don't know if this is exact, but that only 30 countries out of 194 allow this kind of rule, where you would think it would be international law. But the countries have different laws, and apparently people who are supporting this new court rule in Dominican Republic, they say that, well, even Haiti doesn't allow you to get citizenship even if you're born there.
What you just said that there are people here that use those referring those issues that I just mentioned to oppose immigration. But that's exactly what they are doing now. They are giving with this kind of legislation or ruling in Santo Domingo, they are giving those people that are opposing immigration, that are looking for reason to justify their opposition to immigration, they are giving power to them. They are giving reason for them to oppose, because now they could say, you are going to blame me, and you look what they do in Santo Domingo, look what they do in other over there, and you are going to criticize me. Why don't you go back and fix your country before you criticize me? So that's exactly one of the reasons why I wrote this piece of article, because it's ridiculous. They're giving the enemies of immigration reason to oppose immigration in America.
And this ruling affects 200,000 at least in Dominican Republic. It makes them stateless. And so what rights are they going to have to get a job or to get any assistance? You know, it's shocking.
We have to be also fair enough to know that there's not only Haitian. We have other people. In Santo Domingo, we have other, but the Haitians are the biggest group and the poorest one. So they are the one that really concern me the most, because they're gonna get hurt. I mean, they already being hurt, just as it is. They've been hurt. They've been abused. They've been discriminated. As you know, I'm black too. You know, I'm Puerto Rican, but I'm black, and I know what it is. I know, even in my own country, in Puerto Rico, I know how it is. I know how people look at you. I know those words, those expressions that people do or say. That you know really, that a person with a light skin will never know what they're saying. But only a person with dark skin like me will know what they are meaning, what they are saying. So I know.
So you can taste the racism in this room. Yeah. In other words. I mean, there's so many examples, right? And of course, the U.S. has the rule about separate treatment for the Cubans coming over and the Haitians coming over. You know, and so the racism comes up in so many ways. Yes, they can call it politics, but it's. Well, you know better than I. But as far as you're a man of faith, and you have a church here, I understand that the Archbishop of Santo Domingo supports this rule. That's what I read somewhere.
Where do you read that?
Well, it was in comments for the New York Times. You're surprised, I can see. You don't think that's possible, because the Catholic Church here is very pro-immigrant. So you wouldn't think...
I haven't heard that one. Yeah. I cannot comment on that one because I haven't heard that. On the contrary, I have admired, or at least I have respected Bishop Rodriguez,
right,
because of his support of immigrants.
Yeah.
Now, and that's against the Catholic Church, the Catholic teaching, and they support immigrants. They are, as a matter of fact, they are one of the biggest supporters that the immigrant has.
Yeah.
But I never heard about that.
So this ruling is called 016813, but it seems like a racist ruling. What would you think should happen now? What can be done?
That all Dominicans here in the outside Santo Domingo, especially here in New York, that they are fighting so much for immigration and they're fighting so much for the America to give them legal status, that they should show support and they should picket and show because one thing me saying, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm not Dominican, but I haven't heard the Dominican Republic, the Dominican community here raising up against this thing. So come on, show me that you really are, for immigration, and if you want us to keep fighting here, they should come out now and support not only the Haitian, because everybody that will be affected, even some of them will be affected. Even some of them, they don't know it, but some of them will be affected. So come on, where are you on this issue? It is about time for the Dominican, my friends, my colleagues, my community, my Dominican community, it is about time for them to come out publicly in mass and show that they repudiate or that they reject this ruling.
Just since you're Puerto Rican and you spoke about the racism in Puerto Rico, I wondered if there was anything in your own experience more that you can say about that.
Puerto Rican?
Yeah.
Oh, let me tell you something. I don't know now. I don't know because I don't know on this administration now. But you could go to Puerto Rico and then the governors, you name me one black cabinet member.
Okay.
You gotta go to Puerto Rico and name me one black cabinet member in the governor's staff.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know about this one, or maybe this one, because I don't know, maybe this one got one. But even though, check it out.
Yeah.
Check this one out too, to see if they got any black
Ouch.
cabinet member there, okay?
Yeah.
So there's if every black Puerto Rican stupid, you don't have a black Puerto Rican qualified to become member of the cabinet?
Do you have any message you want to add in Spanish to your fellow Puerto Ricans or your fellow Dominicans about this issue?
Es muy desastroso lo que está pasando en la República Dominicana, esta ley de quitarle la ciudadanía dominicana a aquellas personas de padres extranjeros y se han ido desde 1929, 84 años atrás. Esto va a afectar aún a dominicanos que dicen que son de pura cepa. Sus padres quizás no son ciudadanos dominicanos y eso le quita a ellos la residencia. Así que esto es una locura, pero por otro lado, les pido a los dominicanos que ellos se tiren a la calle, ¿no? Que se tiren a la calle, y yo no he visto protestas de dominicanos, no he visto un coraje demostrado por la comunidad dominicana, no he visto una furia de esa que ellos demuestran cuando hay que protestar por la inmigración para ellos mismos. Y en Puerto Rico, le pido a mi compañero puertorriqueño que quizás yo esté equivocado, pero ¿cuándo fue la última vez que un gobernador nombró un miembro del gabinete negro? ¿Y cuántos negros han formado parte del gabinete de los gobernadores en Puerto Rico? ¿Desde cuándo? Así que son preguntas que nosotros nos hacemos, porque nosotros los que sentimos la piel, los que tenemos la piel oscura, sentimos el dolor, y sentimos las miradas, y sentimos el desprecio que otras personas no sienten.
Gracias.
Eso lo hago, mi amor, porque estoy desesperado. Eso lo hago, mi amor, porque estoy desesperado. Donde quiera que tú vayas, yo iré contigo a tu lado. Y si alguien se opone, que tú me traigas tu amor con esta espada que tengo.
This is Adam Carroll with the War on Immigrants Report, part of Global Movement's Urban Struggles on WBAI 99.5 FM. We're speaking about the legacy of colonialism and internalized racism being important factors in the recent court decision in the Dominican Republic that takes away the citizenship of at least 200,000 residents. What about the border of Haiti and the Dominican Republic? Are tensions at the border cultural or political, natural or artificial? We have on the line Todd Miller, reporter for Tom's Dispatches, who recently wrote an important article in Mother Jones about this issue. And welcome to the show. What about the border?
Okay, in 1937 is a critical year when you're looking at how the international boundary was created and formed between the Dominican Republic and Haiti. Of course, they were two separate countries before then, but before 1937, it was more of a border zone, so to speak, where the two countries kind of blended into each other. And what happened in 1937 was a massacre. Dominican forces killed more than approximately 20,000 Haitians in what National Public Radio calls the 20th century's least remembered act of genocide, quote unquote. What that slaughter did was it turned what was a gradual border zone where Haiti and the Dominican Republic blended together into a more demarcated. It created the boundary that between the two countries, and it created the idea that this boundary needs to be to divide the two countries. And now in the contemporary, while looking at contemporary issues between Dominican Republic and Haiti and how the border is enforced now this border has been created that needs to be policed in the same way that the United States polices or has militarized the international boundary line between the United States and Mexico.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that the nature of United States borders, imperial borders, are evolving. What can you say about the U.S. presence at the border in Dominican Republic?
So the U.S. This is one of the possibly one of the most underreported stories of the post 9/11 era. The United States, the idea that the United States has been involved in the kind of formation of a border enforcement apparatus in the Dominican Republic is not really well known, but it's a part of a broader post 9/11 strategy of the United States to promote what a U.S. embassy official in the Dominican Republic called strong borders abroad as part of the global war on terror. So in 2006, a group of U.S. experts were the Dominican Republic, and they filed this report. And the report alluded to lots of vulnerabilities. I think that was the term they used along the border between Dominican Republic and Haiti. And at the end of the report, they recommended that the Dominican Republic form its own border guard. This is 2006. And after that, about a month after that, the president of the Dominican Republic actually issued a presidential decree calling for the formation of a new border guard. It's called CESFRONT. CESFRONT is spelled CESFRONT, and it's an acronym that translates to loosely Specialized Border Security Corps. This Border Security Corps had a year of training. And then in 2007, I believe it was, they began to actually enforce the border line between the Dominican Republic and Haiti in much the same way as the U.S. Border Patrol does between the United States and Mexico. They're concentrated in certain more urban areas right now. What they do, as the U.S. Border Patrol does with Mexico, they sit their assigned X's, which means they sit in assigned posts. So you have one guard placed to one place and 100 yards down down the line, you'll have another guard, and then another 100 yards, you'll have another guard. Each of those guards are in uniform, they're armed, they have assault rifles, and they kind of one after the other look into Haiti to make sure that nobody crosses the boundary line into the Dominican Republic. And like the border wall that you see between the U.S. and Mexico, there's a rudimentary kind of border barrier that they're putting up between, at least what I saw, and I was in the town of Dajabon. In that town, they were putting kind of a rudimentary wall using protest barricades to show the boundary line between the Dominican Republic and Haiti, behind which the border guards were enforcing that line. If you look at the border with Mexico, now you have some of the most advanced and sophisticated surveillance technologies that we have come up with, or at least the surveillance industry has come up with. You have all kinds of cameras and high tech. You have Predator B unmanned aerial vehicles, drones flying over the Mexican borderland, the U.S.-Mexican borderlands. You have all kinds of really sophisticated surveillance equipment, and that you do not see on the border between Dominican Republic and Haiti. What you're seeing more is the rudimentary beginnings of that, kind of like the planting of the seeds of similar to how the U.S.-Mexico border maybe looked, 30 years ago, maybe before all of this kind of surveillance technology. Not to say that the Dominican Republic's border guard does have some technology. In fact, Customs and Border Protection, U.S. Border Patrol has sent them some of their technologies that they use.
So this export of technology and also, I believe, training is helping to, ensure strong borders in the U.S. interests across the globe?
Yes, and that's there's in an article that I just wrote for Tom Dispatch, there was a quote that I'll read verbatim, and it comes from the 9/11 Commission report, and it was back in 2004. But the quote goes, 9/11 has taught us that terrorism against American interests, quote unquote, over there, should be regarded just as we regard terrorism against Americans, quote unquote, over here. In the same sense, the American homeland is the planet. So, what does that quote mean? Does that quote mean that wherever U.S. interests lie, whether they're economic, whether they're political, social, whatever, wherever they lie, that means that's where the U.S. homeland is? Is that what we should derive from that quote? I would guess that's what we should interpret from that quote, because that's where we're seeing the United States really involved in these kind of boundary building. You also see like lots of military operations in places where there's strong U.S. interests. But also on top of that, there's these boundary building operations that are going on. I mean, the sterling examples of this are Iraq and Afghanistan, where in Iraq, I think it's been since 2006 that U.S. Customs and Border Protection have been sending Border Patrol agents to Iraq to help them develop their own kind of border patrol. And the whole idea that I was just discussing with the Dominican Republic being, that the border enforcement model that we see in the U.S.-Mexico border, exporting it to Iraq, or in the same case in Afghanistan, where U.S. Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection have been for quite a while, and now in for example the Southwest United States, we can't. I live in Arizona. We can't travel around the borderlands of Arizona without going through at least one or two Border Patrol checkpoints. Now the same goes for the borderlands of Afghanistan with whatever country they're bordering with kind of similar checkpoints that we see here. So it's this kind of export of this model. It's going into areas of U.S. interest, and in the case of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, in Latin America in general, in the Caribbean, these are the places deemed by U.S. officials for a long, long time as America's quote-unquote backyard, meaning that there have been, for example, the United States has occupied, the military of the United States has occupied both the countries of Haiti and the Dominican Republic several times over the last 200 years, especially in the 20th century.
There does seem to be at least some kind of connection between these restrictions on the border and the increasing demonization and marginalization of certain communities within Dominican Republic.
And it's kind of a model that you don't have to necessarily even look at the Dominican Republic. You could apply it to the United States even, or apply it to all kinds of other places across the globe. This idea of a certain group of people being targeted, monitored, surveilled, and then expelled, if necessary, from the country. But who are these people in the Dominican Republic? Well, if you look at the Haitian, not even the Haitian-born people, like I would call them undocumented immigrants in the Dominican Republic, they're a force of labor also. They're the ones constructing all the big buildings in Santo Domingo and the capital of the Dominican Republic. Just like in the United States, if you go and see who's working construction, who's building all of our buildings, who's picking our food, who's, it's the same targeted group of people who in the United States we're deporting over 400,000 of them each year. So it's the same sort of crisscross of labor exploitation, yet control of population, yet underpaying the same population, or keeping you could even argue that it's keeping a very large workforce that's been stripped of their rights, rather docile and unable to even defend their rights because of some sort of citizenship status. There's been several different proposals, but the biggest proposal for immigration reform in the United States was one put forth by the Senate in June. $6 billion of price tag to bolster border enforcement, or I would call it border militarization, on the U.S.-Mexico border and the U.S. northern border. And this $46 billion includes doubling the U.S. Border Patrol, the ranks of the U.S. Border Patrol. They're calling for 40,000 Border Patrol agents. It's calling for lots of more technologies to be put on the U.S. borders. This sort of bolstering of border militarization within the United States will have its effects abroad. You'll have more resources. For example, if the United States gets more resources for its border enforcement domestically, well, they also have these programs where they're giving trainings abroad to places like the Dominican Republic. They're also transferring some of their equipment to places like the Dominican Republic. I have a chapter about this I have a forthcoming book. It's called Border Patrol Nation, and it's going to be released with City Light Books. And I have a chapter which doesn't do it even more extensively than the article, aforementioned article. And I definitely hope to continue. I will be continuing to follow this issue. In fact, right now I'm putting together a proposal about going to Puerto Rico. The Mona Island, which is actually Puerto Rican territory, which is actually U.S. territory, is less than 30 miles from the coast of. I think that's going to be an upcoming project of mine to look more into that, which will the overall context of the Dominican-Haiti border and all the things that you refer to, including the kind of banishment of people of Haitian descent born in the Dominican Republic, all play into this bigger issue of kind of the global border policing apparatus that we're seeing everywhere.
Right. Well, there may be no borders to the borders, but that would be a very interesting study. What is your book and who is publishing it?
Yeah, so my book is called Border Patrol Nation, Dispatches from the Front Lines of Homeland Security. It's going to be published by City Lights Books, and it will be released in March of 2014. We're putting the finishing touches on it right now.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Todd. That was Todd Miller, and we'll be following up with him and watching out for his book. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Adam. I really appreciate it.
Human Rights Day, December 10th. End torture in New York in prisons and jails. Foley Square, 55 Center Street, New York City, roughly 3 to 6 p.m., but 4 to 5 p.m. teach-in and speak out against solitary confinement. Sponsored by New York Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement, Jails Action Coalition of New York City, Metro New York Religious Campaign Against Torture, and many other groups. Also, for Human Rights Day, to call for changes in NYPD policy, people from many traditions and walks of life are gathering on December 7th to sign a second Flushing remonstrance at historic St. George Episcopal Church. This event is sponsored by Flushing Interfaith Council, Friends Committee for Black Concerns of New York, yearly meeting of Quakers, Morningside Quaker Meeting, and other partners. More than 350 years ago, English citizens of Flushing in New Netherland wrote and signed the Flushing Remonstrance in defense of Quakers who were persecuted for gathering in worship. Many people believe that this document established an important legal precedent guaranteeing religious freedom in the United States of America. Following in this tradition, local leaders and concerned residents are gathering again to sign a second Flushing remonstrance in protest of city policies that have marginalized and alienated some fellow New Yorkers. Just as the founding settlers of Flushing rallied to support Quakers, local religious leaders and concerned residents will gather to express support for local Muslims and people of color impacted by profiling and discriminatory policies. Written in 9 languages, the new remonstrance has been updated to criticize Stop and Frisk, an NYPD program that has routinely violated the rights of young males of color and Latinos on a massive scale, as well as warrantless and wholesale surveillance of New York City mosques and other Muslim American institutions, where St. George's Church, Main Street and 38th Avenue in Flushing, 2 blocks north of the Main Street Flushing station on the 7 subway. 7 p.m., Saturday, December 7th. See you there. Now, next we are discussing the Index of the Disappeared, since it's about to be Human Rights Day, the connection between systems of exclusion that make communities invisible and disappearance. Okay. We have on the line Mariam Khani, one of the artists involved in organizing and creating Index of the Disappeared, together with Chitra Ganesh, and currently a fellow with the Asian Pacific American Institute at NYU, an artist in residence. Welcome to the show, Mariam.
Thanks so much, Adam.
I'm wondering if you could just say a few words about how you came to create this show, and in fact, what it is. I see it described as many things. It kind of goes beyond language, but maybe in your own words.
Well, Chitra and I have been collaborating on Index of the Disappeared since 2004, so that's quite a long time now. And we describe it generally as an experimental archive, and what it's an archive of is renditions, redactions, detentions, and deportations, so really an archive of disappearances, an archive constructed around absences. But it is also a platform, and as a platform, what the Index does is stage public dialogues, discussions around issues and ideas related to the documents and testimony that we archive. And we also stage visual and poetic interventions. So these can take the form of exhibitions, web projects, text published in journals or in other kinds of formats, and also public art projects, any kind of thing like that.
I see that you're collaborating with the Center for Constitutional Rights on one exhibition having to do with Guantanamo.
Well, the Center for Constitutional Rights approached us a little while ago about helping out with a project of theirs. So really what we're doing is kind of consulting with them on a project that they had in mind already, which was had to do with one of their clients, Jamal Ahmadian, who is a Guantanamo detainee who had been cleared for release for several years already. He's been cleared, but is still, of course, in prison. He was one of the participants in the hunger strike that's been going on at Guantanamo for quite a while now. And Jamal has actually managed to mail a number of the drawings that he did in the art classes at Guantanamo to his brother who lives in Montreal. This is unusual. Most of the drawings that are done, the paintings also that are done in the art classes at Guantanamo don't make it off the base. This is common with art and poetry made at Guantanamo because, of course, art and poetry carry loaded symbolic meanings, which can be taken as encoded meanings, which then are quite difficult to get past the censors, because, looking for coded meaning is something that censors have to do. So, in any case, Mel's paintings and drawings are really quite extraordinary. And so CCR wanted to put together possibly an exhibition and definitely a publication around these drawings as part of their advocacy for Jamal's case.
And I also see in your bio that you are working, that you consider archiving a radical practice, or that you have a working group on this issue. I was wondering if you could say more about that.
Right, yeah. So one of the things we're doing during our year in residence at APA, at the Asian Pacific American Institute at NYU, is actually organizing a conference, which will be April 11th to 12th, around radical archives, or around the notion of archiving as a radical practice. And under this kind of rubric, we're interested in considering both archives of radical politics and practices and archives that are somehow radical in form or function, and also the kind of notion of whether archiving in itself might be a radical act in certain moments or contexts. For example, in Palestine, there's a group called Archivists and Librarians of Palestine who recently made a trip there. So that's a moment or context in which just the act of archiving, even constructing a state archive, or reconstituting a state archive in a context like that can be quite a radical thing to do. Likewise in Afghanistan, where I've done a lot of work with state archives, just the act of preserving a state archive, which in a place like the United States is not necessarily radical, in Afghanistan can be quite a radical thing because of the constant risk of iconoclasm.
Well, the public memory seems to be so short, and the resistance of the bureaucracy so strong and entrenched that any kind of action that can open or shed a light on business as usual, or behind the closed doors, or inside prison, is to me quite radical and quite needed. Your focus has been post 9/11 disappearances in the United States, and we know from our friends, neighbors, and clients the impact on families and communities.
You can't really look at these issues in isolation, and you can't really look at post 9/11 detention and disappearances in the United States in isolation from what has happened, what has been done by the United States in other parts of the world, and also what has been done by other states in other parts of the world, because all of these practices influence each other and are connected. And one of the things that we looked at in our recent web project, The Guantanamo Effect, was the way in which Guantanamo is both a place with a distinct history in itself and also an idea which has proliferated around the globe as a kind of self-replicating virus, mutating as it moves, and then in fact coming back to its own origin in a different form and being reapplied there. So that's one of the things that we were interested in. So over time we've looked at a lot of different things, including rendition, and
black sites. We've looked at Bagram. We've looked at Abu Ghraib. We've looked at Guantanamo, of course. We've looked at military codes of conduct and the way that they've been changed over the past decade. We've looked at surveillance and government surveillance and secrecy, and the ways in which the erasure of data conceals and permits the disappearance of real people and real lives. That's a particular interest of ours, and that's one reason in which we have been always very interested in working with officially declassified documents rather than leaked documents, because we're interested in this kind of visual culture of reduction. And the ways in which these blacked out spaces reveal as they conceal.
Interesting. And you're working in galleries, museums, universities, community centers, libraries, windows, the street, the web. Really, it will be fascinating to continue to follow your study and your ongoing project and see how it develops visually and as a performance, if I may call it that. And the performance of surveillance and the performance of exclusion is certainly a whole nother challenge. And we were discussing today the way the citizenship of 200,000 people in Dominican Republic has been erased. And we've seen this in Burma, we've seen this in many other countries. Syria has its own form of disappearances ongoing. So have you gotten much feedback from people around the world?
One of the things we would really like to do within the next kind of 5 years of the project is do more work outside the U.S. and show the project more outside the U.S. We're really interested in doing more research on black sites, in the former black sites in Eastern Europe, for example, as a kind of next phase, as well as former black sites in other parts of the world, which are a bit harder to access, though. And for us, one of the most interesting parts of this kind of long-term nature of the research has been also forging these kind of long-term relationships with people involved in advocacy on the legal side, and activists is really appreciated by them, and they seem to feel that it has a real place in the work. And that, in a way, did surprise us a little, but in a very pleasant way.
Yeah, I have to say I appreciate the added dimension of that art can bring to the struggle for social justice, not to make art into a commodity, or God forbid, or just an idea, but I think the extra dimension is meaningful. So finally, I wanted to ask you about how listeners can follow your work and what is coming up.
Well, they can right now look at the Guantanamo Effect Project on the Creative Time Reports website, which is creativetimereports.org. And they can also see our next show will be at the Asian Pacific American Institute in February. And then actually most of the index archive will be installed at the Kevorkian Center Library at NYU in April. And then we'll also be doing the windows at the Kimmel Student Center at NYU. And that'll be up from mid-April to, I think, the end of May. And then, of course, we'll have our conference on radical archives, which I'm really excited about. There'll be a lot of very, very interesting people coming in for that who think about archives in a lot of different ways, and are coming from all over the world. And that'll be April 11th to 12th.
Well, great. Great way to counter the disappearances with appearances and with...
Exactly.
So thank you very much, Mariam Khani. We'll hopefully follow up with your work, and happy Human Rights Day, and a hopeful Human Rights Day 2013. All right.
Thanks so much, Adam.
Thanks. So that's all there is now. With a new mayor elected, there are new expectations, machinations, dreams, perhaps possibilities. Wishing you all a happy holiday. Remember, don't forget the needy, near and far, yourself. Keep whole, keep holy, and unless erasures and disappearances spread at WBAI, see you in the coming year. Inshallah. Peace.